Hello everybody, welcome to Bear Reviews with me, your host Jack, and tonight it's something a little bit different. We have a beer here from a lad called Jamie, who's been helping out the brewery a little bit. He's come and done a couple of days with me and seeing how things run in a proper brew house, and this is his little homebrew that he brought for me to give a try out. He wants some kind of honest critique on them. Yeah, I'll certainly do that and tell him what I think. And I thought I'd kind of extrapolate this little thing out as well into a sort of how I brew IPAs sort of debate, and how we can brew different kinds of IPAs, looking for different flavours, and just a general kind of talk about brewing IPAs. So it's probably one more for the home brewers or people aspiring to kind of do professional brewing than just your kind of average beer reviewing that I normally do on this channel, which I'm quite looking forward to. So yeah, this is Dog Brain, an IPA that clocks in around 5%. I don't know what hops in it. I don't know what malts he's used either. Bottle condition, so there might be a little bit of haze, but I'm absolutely fine with that, and I am wafting it around a little bit. So let's crack this open and see what we've got, I suppose. Oops, look for the glass then. Thought I'd lost it. Nice bit of fizz on the bottle. Nice bit of carbonation as well, as you can probably see, which we can do with. And might as well use Craftmaster glass, get the best out of it possibly. So I'm assuming this is sugar primed in the bottle, so I'm not surprised that it's got a little bit of fizz on it, as you can probably see. A lovely bit of clarity in it, nice and clear, lovely bright copper colour as well. Good hand, it seems to be sticking around for the ride. Kind of a little bit of different consistency on the head as well, you might be able to see. That's cool, we can go with that. So let's get in there with a good old smell. Yeah, it's got some hops in there. It's got a nice kind of citrusy note to it, orangey, kind of jammy. I can also smell, I'm assuming there's some kind of crystal malts in there. Got a little bit of kind of caramel toffee aroma to it. But it's got a nice little bit. You can definitely smell some kind of fruity, citrusy notes in there. It smells pretty good. So, cheers Jamie, thank you for dropping me the bottle. Let's give it a try. Yeah, it's quite yeasty actually. I'm not sure what yeast you've used, Jamie, but I would imagine it's an English ale yeast because it's got kind of an apple and perry flavours to it. They seem to kind of dominate the palate a little bit and take away from some of the hops. That the aroma that you can smell, that I get kind of a bit of citrus from, isn't present in the beer. It's much more apple and pear and very English ale yeasty, in my mind at least. Again, I'm not entirely sure what you've used, but I imagine that's what it is. Body wise, it's pretty good. There is a nice little bit kind of backbone sweetness to it. But it's like a common thing that I usually find with kit homebrews, like the Cooper's kit homebrews, is that the Cooper's yeast that's used is a very poor quality one, and in my opinion, poor quality, but it comes out tasting very appley and peary. I think we're getting the same with this. So it depends on what you're aiming for, I suppose. In a sort of classical English sense, it works pretty well. It's cleanly fermented. It's got a good clarity to it. It's got a good head, and it's got great aroma all around. You've done a very good job about brewing. There's nothing wrong with the brewing at all. I just think it's probably lacking. I don't know. If you go for an American style IPA, it's definitely lacking in the hop presence. If you go for an English style one, the yeast is still a bit too prominent. So we need to find a way of kind of shifting that around a bit. So a suggestion with this would be, and I'll look forward to trying some more of your other homebrews as well, would be to step away from, or to use a very good quality yeast in this. So I know that Jamie has some not USO4, but SO4, Safale SO4, which is an English ale yeast that he's using in a beer, German IPA that I kind of sort of helped him formulate, I suppose. But a USO5 yeast and an IPA, for me, is personally my kind of choice of yeast. There's also some other ones you can look at, like the East Coast breweries in the US who are using some English strains, like London Ale Yeast 3, but that comes with a few different quibbles as well. But essentially something that's quite highly attenuated will do well, but from a good quality supplier, it can't go wrong. Like the West Coast yeast from Mangrove Jacks or something might work, and make sure there's an appropriate amount of pitching going on in there as well. And that should help get rid of some of those yeasty flavours or the yeast phenols. It's got this appley and perry note, this S3 appley and perry note. That's what I'd do. Aromatics wise, it does smell pretty good, but if you want to kind of boost aromatics a little bit, dry hopping and double dry hopping will help, just to boost that, and also help get some flavour in the beer as well, to get a bit more I don't know, if you go for the American thing to get more pine, resin, citrus, grapefruit, all that sort of jazz. If you're not going for that, then cool. Head down a different road, I suppose. So, a little bit kind of about how I brew IPAs, I suppose. When you're brewing an IPA, you need to kind of define yourself as what are you trying to achieve, really? If you're going for the big, IPA in a modern sense being a massive hop bomb, then obviously you want to try and make the focus on those hops. If you're going for a slightly more balanced, say, English-style IPA, then you also need to make sure there's a good amount of malt character in there too. There's two different roads to go down when you're formulating a base malt recipe. Some breweries that make very good beers just using the absolute bog, basic standard kind of recipe with just 95% pale malt and 5% either very low crystal or carapils or something like that. It will give a very, very straw-like, very bright and light sort of colour to your beer, your base malt, and just provides a little bit of a backbone, but nothing much. It just lets the hops be the flavour and the aroma, and there's be no malt at all. If you start amping up a bit of those, adding a few extra crystal malts in, some more carapils, some wheat malts, things like that, you become more like an English IPA. So if you say more like 90% with 10% different malts in, to kind of bump out the malt profile a bit, you're heading more towards an English and a balanced style one, where you'll get some more of those toffee and caramel flavours from the Karasin crystals, and some more body from the wheats. Which should kind of round it out a little bit, make it a little bit softer, and let it be a kind of essentially like a really strong bitter, but probably slightly more on the hop forward notes. Hops wise, obviously, if you're choosing traditionally English hops, East Kent Goldings, Fuggles, Challenger, those sort of beers, those sort of hops, you're going to be heading more again towards an English style IPA, and you're going to expect some more kind of earthy, spicy flavours, but also that kind of marmalade jammy note. The Meantime IPA, which I believe unfortunately isn't going to be produced for much longer, so go out to your local Marks and Sparks, pick them up, is a really good example. Nice and strong at 7%, loads of English hops in, tastes great. It's a really fab example of like a properly traditional style English IPA. With the whistle. If you're going for a slightly more classic West Coast American style one, you want to be using all the superstar hops. Essentially, it ain't going to be cheap, but that's what you're going to get if you're looking for that pop blam. So if you're looking for something a little bit more like, say, that, which we tried the other night, or say that, which we tried the other night as well, more in the American style ones. I mean, the hops they're using in this, so this fellow here's got Chinook, Columbus, Citrus, Centennial, Cascade, and Amarillo, superstar hops all in all. And the double axe has got Amarillo and Citra and Mosaic in as well. So you can't go wrong with using American varieties. The quintessential C's, the Cascade, the Chinook, and the Columbus, or Columbus Tomahawk Zeus, if you want to call it that, CTZ, they're all roughly the same hop. You will get that nice base layer of at least grapefruit from Chinook, certainly. Columbus gives you the dank notes, and Cascade gives you a nice kind of spicy floral note, but it's heading towards the grapefruity notes, in my opinion at least. This year's harvest of Cascade in particular is particularly fruity and grapefruit. Really good batch. Those are a good kind of way of starting off. Nice little bit of a set of bitterness at the start of the boil is always good, and adding your aroma and flavour hops later on. So try and hit those. I mean, if you look at your favourite kind of IPAs and see what they're using, that's always a good way of formulating IPAs from there onwards. Seeing what they use, seeing what kind of combination of flavours they produce. But obviously, you want, in my opinion at least, if you're going to use expensive hops, you want to try and retain as much flavour and aroma from them as possible. So I'd always use a relatively cheap but high alpha acid hop at the beginning of the boil, something like Magnum or Summit. Those are the two that I use a lot. Summit in particular is like the main bitter and hop in the brewery that I use. And that just gives a nice, clean, smooth bitterness and plenty of alpha acid, so I only have to chuck in a small amount. As you get further along your boil, you can start to adding your flavour hops and also your aroma hops. Somewhere kind of post 30 minutes, all the way up to pretty much 5 minutes before the end of boil is where you tend to put your flavour hops. It's an addition that I do not do anymore, if I'm honest, because I still think a lot of aromatics and flavours get boiled off, all those essential oils get boiled off, but it still works in traditional English IPAs in particular. I think English hops might be just that little bit more resilient in terms of essential oils, while your superstar American ones that are all big and pungent might just boil off a bit. Aroma hops at the end of the boil just retains as essential oils. Doesn't let them isomerize too much and should stick in the beer a bit. But post-boil additions is where I'm all about. It's still hot side addition of hops, so it still allows a level of connection between malt and hops essential oils, some kind of connection between the two of them, and also lets the yeast digest and work on those essential oils as well. I'm trying not to make it too complicated, but some of the East Coast IPAs, as in the New England style IPA brewers, are really ratcheting on to hops in fermentation. So they're even dry hopping in fermentation, towards inner fermentation, to allow some interaction between yeast and hops, which gives them this characteristic flavours that they're looking for. But that's an aside. So I'm all about hot side post-boil additions, as in whirlpooling or hop standing before you chill down your beer. In the brewery, we've got a hop back, so I can transfer the beer from the kettle over. Literally, it's like a big tub with a shower on top of it that showers the beer over the hops and lets them soak in all those flavours. Hop stands are great, in my opinion, to get flavour and aroma into your beer before you do anything like dry hopping. Fermentation wise, as I've already said, if you go for an English style beer, then a good English ale yeast you can't go wrong with, I suppose. That'll help you get those English flavours. If you go for a more West Coast or American style one, you want a nice attenuative and very clean ester free IPA yeast. Just West Coast ale yeast is a good one that comes to mind. White Labs do. I mean, all major yeast producers do a clean American ale yeast for sure. If you want something a little bit more funky and you're pushing and you're really still looking to kind of round out your beers, something like Conan, the Vermont ale yeast, is difficult to use but gets good results. Produces these really peachy notes over the top of your beer, which can really aid the flavours in your IPA or in your beer. Or something like London Ale Yeast 3, which produces soup-like beers when it's used with dry hopping. But guys like Tired Hands and Trillium don't use it. Treehouse, they use London Ale Yeast 3 to exceptional lengths. If you look at some other beer tubers' reviews on their beers, because I've yet to have some, they are well acclaimed. And actually, it's Trillium who use the English dry ale yeast, I believe, that W Yeast use, which I've never had good results with, but they clearly do, so they're doing something right. And then after fermentation, as I say, these New England style IPAs, they tend to dry hop before the fermentation's finished. But most of us will then, to add extra aroma and some extra, a very small amount of flavour, but mostly aroma and pungency, is dry hopping, which is post-fermentation, chucking those hops in and letting, because the beer is now cooled down, those essential oils do not evaporate off. They should somehow soak into the beer, so to speak, and give that final little pungency, that nice little aroma. So if you're going for that big pungent smell, loads of hops, loads of just stinking of hop juice, then that's what you want to do, and getting some of those more complex aromas through in the beer too. You don't have to do that step if you've done plenty in the kind of post-boil, or you don't have to at all, depending on what you're looking for, of course. Making a beer is all about who you are and what you want to do and what your beer wants to smell and taste like, to be honest. That's just a really quick rundown, I suppose, of how I develop a recipe for an IPA and what I would use. A slight addendum, actually. I was asked not so long ago how many hop varieties that you think you should use in an IPA, because some beers do very successfully using a hell of a lot of hops and achieving really good results. That's a good example. It's got 6 or 7 hops in it, right? But then there's also fantastic examples of beers with far less hops in, and really fantastic examples, if I can... bit out of reach, but Pseudo Sue up there, which I know is an American Pale Ale, but it's a very hoppy American Pale Ale, it's just Citra. So you can get good results with all of them, but I would always suggest, at least when you're doing the recipe the first few times, is keep it simple, stupid, KISS. Use a small amount of hops. Think of the flavours you're looking for. So if you want some like nice mango-y, juicy citron, you've got that there. Mix that in with, say, something like Columbus to give you a dank profile, a really big resinous hoppy note, and something added in like Centennial that's just got a nice spicy flavour, but also that classic grapefruit. There you go. Those are 3 hops that should, in theory, you get a nice breadth of flavours across them. It would be a good way to start, and then see what you like, see what hops you like, and go from there. If you're already quite an experienced homebrewer, it'll be relatively easy, I suppose, to choose the hops you're looking for. But that's just a few little tips and hints as to how I would go around producing an IPA, and I hope for Jamie at least that it would be really helpful. And I'll have a chat with him about what he wants to do with it, and his IPAs. But it's a really well fermented, really well made beer, Jamie, and thank you ever so much for letting me have a ramble for about a hell of a long time on the creation of IPAs. I hope no one's too bored. And please like, favourite, comment and subscribe as always. Until the next beer review, cheers everyone.